All right, here we go. So joining me today is Chris Spike Low, drummer, photographer, and traveller. There he is. Chris has weaved his way through the UK and the world, touching on many subcultures, but always retaining the spirit of where he started his punk rock back in Scotland. So Chris has been in bands such as Political Asylum, where he started as a wee young lad, the Apostles, Polloi, the Parkinsons, and currently the ever gloomy and infamous Part 1. How you doing, Chris?
Very well, very well.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining me, mate. So,
good to see your cheery face.
So, what is going on in the life of Chris Lowe at the moment? What's
life of Chris Lowe at the moment? Well, in 5 days' time, I'm going to be on stage. Actually, at this very time, we're on stage at 9 o'clock, which is 10 minutes ago in British time. So at this very time on Saturday, I'm going to be on stage with Part 1, playing at the Rebellion Punk Festival in Blackpool, the largest punk festival in Europe, I think. If not one of the largest in the world. Probably the largest in the world.
At this point, yeah. It's floated around. I remember the Holidays in the Sun thing. It was somewhere.
Aye.
It wasn't always in Blackpool.
That was like the precursor to it, yes.
I mean, I'm sure the fact that the festival's in Blackpool is an added bonus, being the most exotic location of Great Britain, right?
Indeed.
They
the
could
French
probably
Riviera.
only...
Without all the goods. Like the French Riviera without the glamour. It's a grizzly. Actually, I better not say that. Maybe people from Blackpool will be watching.
Well, Blackpool's got a sunny past. They're the home of such punk rock icons as Screwdriver, if I remember right. So
yes, indeed.
That can't bode well for the festival.
And it's also, I'm just looking forward to the fun fair. It's got like a big fun fair there, which apparently you can just buy like a day pass to. But you see all these things and you just think, they're kind of held together with gaffer tape, and it's like, I'm not going up in that, no chance. But Rebellion next Saturday, and I'm also doing a photography exhibition now. I'm showing 20 photographs from my acclaimed Tokyo Punk exhibition, Up Yours and Japanarchy Today, which I first showed in London in August, and then there was a book came out, or rather there was this. I can see a copy here.
Dun, 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 dun.
There was this.
Excellent.
Lots of nice pictures. See all this sort of thing.
That's
there was that came out,
and then I
had two. Have you got a copy of that?
I do not have a copy of that, but this is something.
I'll send you one.
That's definitely a subject we're going to get to momentarily. So
yes, and I had two exhibitions in Tokyo about that. I don't want to get to that. What else? I'm starting. There's a T-shirt line coming out in a couple of weeks. A few like sort of more graphic-y kind of T-shirts I've done. There's one of Christiana F, one of Ulrika Meinhof, and one which is like one will be a surprise. So I've got that, and also I've kind of got back into chefing, which I've been really enjoying. Because I used to work as a chef back in Edinburgh, but since I moved down to London, just kind of fell out of that. But I'm now presently working as a sort of commis chef in a Japanese restaurant in Camden.
Oh right, okay, fantastic.
So learning, it's quite kind of full on, because basically everybody else I work with is Japanese and members of the same family. So it's kind of like really in at the deep end. But
you had spent some time in Japan for quite a...
Oh yeah. I've spent quite a lot of time in Japan, but
not just visiting. You lived there briefly. Is that correct? Or?
On a few sort of short occasions, but never for longer than like 3 months. I mean, I've been there about 35 times.
Oh wow! Okay.
But never for longer than like 3 months because of the visa restriction.
Right.
But no, my Japanese it's hopeless. It's absolutely hopeless. There was a while when I've stayed there for extended periods, it actually gets okay, just because you have to communicate with people.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody, always everybody always wants to speak English, so it's quite, getting back into it's quite difficult. But this, the general idea is not only am I learning to make, delicious Japanese food, but also I'm improving my lingo a bit, so that's all good.
So what part of Japan do you tend to float to?
Tokyo,
just
always
mainly
Tokyo.
Yeah, it's...
I mean, I've been to Yokohama, Osaka, Kyoto, other places, but always stay in Tokyo. It's just most amazing city on the planet. Apart from LA, maybe. LA is my new favorite city. Getting a bit bored with Tokyo now. It's all about LA now.
It's barely a city. I would say Los Angeles is a big sprawl of hopelessness and nihilism at this point. But
You should wait till you visit London the next time.
oh, really? Yeah, I
Change in London over the last 12 months is just seismic. And not very good.
12 months. Last time I was in London was 12 months ago for an impromptu visit. I'm from Bristol originally.
Yeah, I think I was actually in Tokyo then. I think when you were here, I was in Tokyo.
That's right. I think
Yeah.
we missed each other. Yeah.
Yeah, because you were at the Underworld or something. I remember.
Well, it was an interesting day actually. I just drove from Bristol to London. Very good. Well, in fact, in England, my best friend, I would say, and most important human being to me. He's what he does, apart from being my old boss, is that he's the tech for Killing Joke. So Killing Joke was setting up to play some shows with the Levelers last year, which was a bit of a weird mix. Killing Joke.
Who's headlining? Killing Joke, I hope.
Killing Joke, yeah, Killing Joke, and the Levelers together.
Because I know the Levelers are really massive in some places like Germany or some other places.
Well, this is some festival in England.
Unfathomable reason.
It was a strange thing, but Dave said, Dave, my friend over there, he said Killing Joke are rehearsing over in West London near Earl's Court, and we just jumped in the car and drove over there. So I had the rest of my band with me. I was like, what are we doing today? Oh, we're going to go to London and we're going to go watch Killing Joke rehearse for this festival. It was fun. So it was a good day out. Yeah. So it's always fun to watch Big Paul hit drums, which is possibly the best thing that anyone
Amazing
can
drummer.
ever witness.
Absolutely incredible drummer. All-time favorite drummers, actually.
Oh,
I was just watching a video of him. There's have you seen that little documentary? It's like a 15-minute documentary about him.
I haven't.
It's fantastic. It's on YouTube.
Right.
It was just one of the things that just came up in my. I was originally listening to the Killing Joke Peel sessions, and that was one of the suggestions in the timeline.
Right. No, it's he's an oddly humble guy. He's got an interesting story himself. I'm hoping to be able to sit down and interview him at some point. He's in New York now. He's a very eclectic history, but yeah, very very interesting. So let's get back to London and how you're from Stirling, Scotland. Is that
Stirling in central Scotland? It's about
Scotland, yeah.
20 miles from Glasgow, 30 miles from Edinburgh. So
just a
kind
bit
of bang in the central Scotland. It's now a city. When I was living there, it was a town.
Oh, really?
It's now got city status. I don't know why.
Yeah, in England, doesn't a city, for it to be a city, it has to have a cathedral, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what makes a city a city. But Stirling obviously has a castle. Maybe they've just a very famous castle. Maybe they just thought that was good enough.
Well, the castle's amazing. Stirling Castle is fantastic.
Is it still in one piece? I've never been.
It is. It's probably one of the most impressive castles. I mean, it's probably in some respects better than Edinburgh Castle. I was up Edinburgh Castle about 2 years ago, and I was thinking Stirling's probably better than this.
Right.
It's more mental, and they have all people kind of gnashing about doing battle reenactments. So you'll walk around the corner, trying to find the toilet, and there'll be some big beardy guy will come out with a sword. Or it's excellent, fantastic.
That's just how most of the world views Scotland, anyway. Apart from that and drunk people, but it's okay.
Yes, there's still plenty of them. Still plenty of them. Another one on their way here.
Indeed. Scotland's number one export is what I hear. So. So how did you end up in London originally? We're talking Chris Spike Low. We're talking 14, 15?
14.
14
I was basically I got into punk really young when I was about 9 or 10. Mm-hmm. Started going to gigs round about then. Well, first gig I went to, I was 10. And so then through that, the way punk is, originally, you're into the kind of big bands, and then you encounter fanzines, you get into the tape trading. I did a fanzine of my own, started up a few bands of my own, Toxic Noise, then band Distraught, and then Distraught became Political
Political
Asylum.
Asylum, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so recorded the first demo with them. Fresh hit in 1983 when I was 14, and then I had basically had a big fallout with a couple of the members of the band, and by that time I'd started writing to the Apostles a lot because one of my favourite bands.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really loved their music. Used to get these amazing letters back from Andy Martin. So I went on holiday for a kind of long weekend with my mum to Paris, to France, Marseille actually. First time I'd ever been abroad. And then coming back from Marseille, I just said, "Oh, I'll spend a couple of days in London, just go and sort of visit him." So I met up with Andy Martin. He was going in the recording studio that weekend to record a demo with this band called the Assassins of Hope. Mm-hmm. The Apostles used to play quite a few gigs if they were another kind of anarchy centre band. And I just did like a jam with them then. Everything went quite well. Prior to this, Razzle, who was the drummer in Hanoi Rocks, had been very briefly playing for the Apostles.
Right.
Because they were kind of in between drummers. But at this time, I think he was squatting with Dave, the bass player of the Apostles. And Hanoi Rocks he'd been in the band called The Dark before Hanoi Rocks were just kind of starting to get big. And then suddenly, maybe one of their first records came out or something, I'm not too sure myself. But they suddenly got big, so he couldn't really commit.
With the famous Masquerade song.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I know.
That's the one.
Uh-huh.
And so basically he couldn't commit, so Andy said, "Do you want to join the Apostles?" And I was like, aye, big style, getting invited to join your favourite band. So a couple of months after that, I went down to London and recorded the second Apostles EP, Rising from the Ashes. And then over the space of the next year, I recorded 3 other records with them.
So did you, at this age, because you're quite young, were you still in Scotland and then travelling down?
I was still in Scotland. I was still going to school, although I got suspended from school on 2 occasions and then finally got expelled. But we don't want to get into that. So basically, whenever things like that would happen, I just come back to. I just basically fire down to London. You could get a train now, or you could get a bus. You could get a bus, an overnight bus, for like about £10.
Right.
And I just get the bus down and arrive in Victoria Station and just go and stay in these like mad spots Andy had with like no running water and holes in the floorboards and like loads of junkies downstairs and
so
how
was it
really good.
How was it for a 14, 15-year-old kid? How long is that journey? That's a big train journey, right? That's an overnight kind of thing.
Yeah. It was overnight. It was probably about 10, 12 hours overnight.
So this is before Walkmans and obviously iPods and shit. That's
a long time before that. They generally turn the lights off.
Right. Were you always quite a nomadic soul, or was this a big daunting thing for you?
I think the other thing is then. I think basically kids were probably a lot more independent. It's not like now. Now it's like, okay, now it's 9 o'clock. I'm on like quite a busy street. You never see a busy residential street. You never ever see kids playing on the street.
Absolutely.
Something you never see. You never see that now. Mm-hmm. I don't know what America's like, but you never see that in Britain now.
I'll tell you what America's like. America, if you're under 8 years old and
forgetting that kind of, it keeps on coming out a wee bit.
Go on. Go. Sorry.
No, it wasn't interrupting. It was basically just the sound kits on kind of like cutting out, you can get that kind of mic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's basically just all the papers now just think if they let their periwinkles out in the street, the spectre of Mr. Nonce is going to, you're going to get like sort of predatory pedos are going to come and like nick them off the street, which is very, very remote occurrence.
That's a thing that they say came from just media. Like in the 80s, there was
it's a moral panic. It's a total moral panic.
As 24-hour news channels came about, there was some high-profile cases where that happened, and then it just got hyperbolically spun into a moral
Yes,
panic.
yes, totally. I mean, things like that generally happen about once every 5 or 10 years.
I
In
know,
reality,
it's insane. I mean,
it's really very, very seldom. But now, of course, because you haven't got these kids out playing on the street with their mates, you know, they're going to be sitting at their computers, where there are going to be like real kind of predatory pedos, like pretending they're kind of like 12-year-old girls, asking them to send photos of their cocks and stuff.
Yeah,
you know, it's just crazy. Anyway, how did we get onto that?
Hey, you know. Well, it's because I'm a dad, and I'm a father, and I'm paranoid.
I think kids were a lot more independent then. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, fair enough, I was going down to London and doing that stuff, but, you know, I knew quite a lot of other, you know, it's like, if you go to gigs, you know, there'd be quite a lot of other kids who are under the age of, you know, 50. I mean, for instance, Crass would always play matinee gigs. Very often Crass would play 2 gigs.
Right.
Mm-hmm. For, like, kids under the age of kind of 15. You know, so if you think about a band like Crass, for it to be economically worth them playing a gig, you know, for under 15-year-olds, that shows how many under 15-year-olds must have been into them.
Absolutely.
You know, I remember seeing the Foreskins as well. I remember seeing them play a matinee show.
Mm-hmm. So how old were you when you bought your first pint?
When I bought my first pint, one of the very first times I ever bought when I probably about 14.
Right. Okay.
About 14, but I actually remember. Because I was speaking to him, because Nick Boland, who's the founder of Napalm Death, who you might know, he's still a good mate of mine. But when I was 13, basically through tape trading and just kind of writing to each other, because he was a big Apostles fan as well, and we were both doing fanzines, and he just started up Napalm Death. We used to write to each other, and I went to stay with him at his parents' when I was 13, so summer of 1982, and I think it was Napalm Death's 4th gig, and we ended up going to that. And on the train, we'd bought like bottles of cider, as you do when you're a kid. So we got sort of logged in them. And then we went to this pub, which was called the Nottingham Rowing Club or something. It was Dig from Erie who was putting the gig on. And we all got served there. You know, mad. These kind of like 13-year-old kids, and we were all like getting served pints. So that's definitely one of the first time I ever got a pint. And then we ended up like, I still can't. Me and Nick still can't remember how this happened. But one of I think I swear Nick headbutted me, and I sort of pushed him in the water. But I think he's got a sort of different interpretation. But one of us ended up with a sore head. One of us ended up very wet. That's all I can remember about that day.
It was a rowing club. Something's gonna go wrong.
Yeah. I know it's gonna be. What they expect?
Yeah, totally.
It'd be rude not to, as they say.
So were you one of the younger fellas hanging around in that scene at the time, or was everyone kind of roughly within 5 years your age?
Maybe a few years older. I mean, I'd say, the average age was probably about 17, 18.
Right. Okay.
It's quite a kind of young scene. If you think about anarcho-punk, it was kind of quite a young scene.
Absolutely.
And then you get older guys like Andy Martin of the Apostles, and maybe a few of the other kind of fanzine writers.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of more original, like squatting types, and been through a lot more. And then you also got some of the more kind of traditional anarchist types who maybe hadn't even come through punk, who I came across through things like the Anarchy Centre, the Crass set up and stuff.
Right. Okay. And speaking of the Anarchy Centre, which is quite infamous for a bunch of shows, Peni, Rudimentary Peni, Crass, Dirt, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, all that.
Yes.
So, how much... It was a conglomerate of people. Was there, you say there was like anarchists there? Was there like Socialist Workers' Party? Was there kind of all kinds of
you wouldn't have had that. What the Anarchy Centre was originally... in Wapping, it was disused premises, and after the money from Crass Bloody Revolutions went to some of the people who were involved in the Persons Unknown case, Rowan Bennett, Vince Stevenson, Iris Murdoch, a few other, traditional anarchists who were, according to the prosecution, planning to commit acts of terrorism in furtherance of subversion of the state, etc. Persons Unknown, that's how they got their name. But they put this, when the case was dropped, they put their money into setting up this anarchy centre. So originally you had these traditional anarchists from there, plus these kind of like new kind of anarcho-punk, before anarcho-punk even existed as a genre. Nobody used the term anarcho-punk then. It just didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so that was people like the Mob, with the Apostles, Public Fanzine, Mike Double, guy who did Toxic Graffiti, and lots of other kind of like fairly unsung people, Assassins of Hope, Flack, brilliant band called Flack, Cynics, Hagar the Womb. There was a lot of people who, everybody knows about Rudimentary Peni, the Mob, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Not so many might know of Flack or the Cynics or Assassins of Hope, but all these people, played just as great a part. After that, I think the lease expired on the. I never went to the actual Wapping Anarchy Centre, but I went to Centro Iberico, which was the one set up afterwards.
Right.
And that was originally a Spanish centre set up by Spanish anarchists.
Mm-hmm.
Many of whom were exiled by Franco under, they'd have received death sentences if they'd returned to Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So these were quite old guard.
Yes.
Very interesting characters. I was kind of lucky enough to have met some of them. And actually, another associate to them, Jordi Valls, who was involved with Throbbing Gristle and is a sort of acclaimed, artist in his own right. He knew a lot of people back then, Miguel Garcia, various other folk. But again, the people who came from the Wapping Anarchy Centre, the kind of more the punk types rather than the sort of traditional anarchist types, I think, came to Centro Iberico. Because the Centro Iberico was, from the onset, I think it was Sundays, they used to have, it was more like a kind of gigging venue, really, than anything else.
So
there were various other meetings and things like that, but I don't really think they were that well attended, to be honest.
So at the time, obviously, you say that obviously the term anarcho-punk wasn't around, which goes for most subgenres, I would say. It's always a posthumous labeling and packaging kind of thing. I have
very much so.
I have the 12-inch vinyl, the Animal Liberation vinyl, and it's got D&V and crass stuff. It also has Coil and
oh yeah, and that one, yes, with the stencil cover, fantastic record,
So, would you say there was a lack of boundaries as far as artistic stuff goes?
That's a very, very interesting point. Because basically the term anarcho-punk came, I think it was born, well, funnily enough, there's been a lot of research into the kind of semantics of anarcho-punk, and because I'd always thought Ian Bone, the Foreign Class War, was one of the very first people who ever used the term. But my friend Matthew Mosley subsequently discovered there was a review of my fanzine. In this fanzine, Acts of Defiance, I believe, which would have been 1982, which describes my fanzine as a anarcho-punk fanzine, and that's what perhaps the first instance of the term being used in print.
Oh, really?
So that's definitely one from my Wikipedia entry.
That's a cross for you to bear, right there.
but basically, the genre term just came from anarcho-punk bands who played the Anarchy Centre. That's really where it came from.
Okay. Which if you take the word...
very, very true. There was a lot more musical diversity back then, and also a lot more cross-pollination between the scenes. I mean, for instance,
you were quite a fan of the kind of more left field power electronics kind of.
Totally. That's what I was going to say. I mean, Throbbing Gristle played the Centro Iberico. Whitehouse famously played the Centro Iberico. I think maybe what other bands played there?
It's funny you mentioned Whitehouse because last time we were hanging out was at the.
Sorry.
It's funny you mentioned Whitehouse. The last time we were hanging out having a beer was at that Consumer Electronics show.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Philip, fine man.
So,
they're one of my total all-time favorite bands, if not my all-time favorite band. And
I'm not quite sure if Whitehouse could.
Back then, it's like the way I kind of first got in touch or encountered them would have been around about 1982 when they just played the Centro Iberico, and then Andy Martin of the Apostles was really, really into them. I mean, he produced a copy of his fanzine, which was all about power electronics, Whitehouse, consumer electronics, Sutcliffe Jurgen, Ramley, all that sort of nascent, the Broken Flag scene, organisation, all that sort of thing. And that was fantastic. But again, you did get that cross-pollination between that scene and the kind of anarcho-punk scene. Like, famously, I think it was Anti-Anxiety who put Whitehouse on maybe the Fulham Greyhound with Fox of Pink Indians. I know that was one of their fairly early gigs.
Right.
And you did get a lot of people from both those kind of... I mean, most of the folk who were in the power electronics scene had probably been into the kind of anarcho-punk scene to some degree, maybe a bit earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, in its early days, I always say it's kind of like, a scene that's kind of best until 1984, and obviously like Crass split up, but not just because of Crass, just for the simple fact that at that time it was a very, very musically disparate scene, or not disparate, diverse,
Mm-hmm.
In every kind of aspect, musically, not so much ideologically, because obviously there was a lot of common ground which emerged even then, which is a good thing, graphically, etc. And I think that's very well evidenced just through looking at the bullshit detectors. If you look at the first bullshit detector compilation Crass put out, there's an incredible diversity of sound. Everything from stuff that sounds like kind of, music concrete, proto kind of power electronics, to, old Penny Rambo like battering on the sort of drums and Steve England wailing along. There's that track with those kids just playing like a kind of, a toy guitar and stuff like that. And then you've got things like Counterattack, Icon AD, various other bands you could have went for.
Well, it was interesting bands like D&V, drums and voice, just very powerful band. But
you just look at the stuff that Crass Records released, everything from Andy T. You listen to that Andy T record now. I mean, sonically, that's amazing. Strangely enough, it's a lot of the records. I always think it's a lot of the records which you didn't appreciate as much at the time. That are actually the ones which stand out now. I was listening to the Snipers record the other day. That's amazing. Obviously the Zound single and the Anxiety single, all kind of stunning records which actually sound, even today you listen to them and it's like, whoa, where did that come from? Totally unique sounds.
So let's pull back from that. I mean, obviously there was a lot of stuff that you got Throb and Gristle through Crass, through Test Apartment, through all kinds of bands who were kind of pulling.
Yes.
You mentioned that these bands are kind of pulling from the same kind of ethos. So we're talking 82, 83, 84. We're talking Cold War stuff. So how was it being a teenager, as UK subs said, like stuck in between the Yankees and the Russians? How was that? Was there an impending anxiety towards everyone?
Strangely enough, there actually was. I mean, I remember a few occasions being at school when rumours it might sound. I'm saying strangely enough because it's one of these things that if you kind of look back in it, it's. I mean, the whole kind of iconography and tropes which went with the whole kind of anarcho-punk scene really kind of exacerbated that thread, to an extent that may not have actually existed. I mean, for instance, I remember.
You think it might have been a bit hyperbolic in its sense?
Yes, definitely.
Right.
Definitely, without doubt. And also, I remember conscription being something that you kind of really thought about.
Well, the Falklands
basically everybody was thinking, at any time now, Ronald Reagan is just going to like press some, everybody. Yeah, that's the kind of idea you had when you're kind of like a kid who's been listening to Crass all these times. That Ronald Reagan's basically just kind of sitting there, going increasingly kind of insane, and he's sitting at a desk, and on this desk there's like a big red button with the words like "nuke the world" on it. And one day he's just going to be kind of, just stumbling for that glass of port in his table, and like, whoops, his elbow's going to go in that, and that's going to be at the end of the world.
And this,
you thought things like that were going to happen in the same way as you thought like conscription was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, this was the time where the Falklands War was happening and coming to an end.
The Falklands was in 1982, and that's when
I don't want to age you at all, but I don't want to age you at all, but I was born on the main day of the Battle of Goose Green.
All right.
So
okay.
You say 1982. May 20th, 1982 was my birthday.
Yeah. Hey, there we go. There we go. Crazy.
So yeah, there was. I
mean, I can remember when it was declared that basically Britain was at war with the Falklands, because it was one of these things that it wasn't even just like Britain's at war in the Falklands. It's like Britain's at war. That was the rumor that went around school. We're at war. We're at war.
So that's...
And that was quite mad because you've been listening. I don't know if it was a matter of if you hadn't been listening to all these kind of Crass records, reading all these fanzines and stuff, if you'd actually be thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get conscripted. I'm going to stand on like some anti-personnel mind that's going to like blow my legs off, and I'm going to end up like Simon Weston on that poster you got in the middle of "Yes, Sir, I Will" with half my face all blown off, and I'm,
So the conscription thing was a genuine fear, and it's a fear that has a historical precedence because it's historically happened.
Yes.
The Vietnam War with the birthday lottery.
Yeah,
crazy stuff like that. And then amongst that, there was, I can't remember the name of it, that very famous movie about nuclear bombs landing on England and the
War
aftermath.
Was it the War Game?
No, not War Games. That was the American one.
Was it Threads?
Threads, yeah, Threads.
Yes.
Yeah,
that was pretty mad.
It's not the kind of movie you'd want to take a date to.
No, but I remember when I was probably about, really young, maybe about 11. Probably 11. I think I was about 11 when I went to like a CND meeting and they were showing the War Game.
Right.
And I was like, basically kind of like a video nasty. You hadn't really seen anything as traumatic as that at that age at all. And that was like really, really traumatic to actually see.
So you say that the with the imagery and all that of a lot of these bands, because for just housekeeping's sake, let's call it anarcho punk. But
yes, of course,
amongst that you have the more industrial side of stuff, which had its own aesthetic.
Well, that had its own iconography of horror, which was generally came from sort of Throbbing Gristle, but then you got the power electronics bands trying to push the envelope further.
Absolutely. Just would you say that the sheer idea that tomorrow could not happen was liberating to a lot of these people playing?
Perhaps. That may well be something. It may well be one of the reasons why people perhaps didn't think they'd then be accountable for what they did.
But would you say, was there a big pop culture kind of pushback? When all this kind of subversive stuff was going on, was there a big kind of pop culture just glazing over of everything?
No, well, there was to an extent, but I think people who weren't maybe about at that time would actually be quite surprised at the degree of politicization which was shown out with the punk scene.
Right.
It's one of these things, it's like, if you were to say to people that Wham actually played benefit striking minors, a lot of people would be amazed by that. But, Wham were actually one of the very few bands. This was like, Wham were playing benefits for the striking minors before Crass ever did.
Right, wow, okay.
So that's, if you were to say that to a lot of people, they'd be pretty amazed. And there was a lot of songs which had they might have been kind of nuanced or euphemistic, but a lot of songs had fairly kind of politicized themes behind them, although perhaps not explicitly.
Right.
They might have been anti-conscription. There were a lot of songs which were anti-nuclear. You have to remember that you had songs which would probably get into the charts. And talking about the top 10, Stand Down Margaret by The Beat, I think that was.
Right.
That's basically when Two Tone was very popular.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been a band who would get in the top 5. And that's them actually singing a song, asking for the Prime Minister to stand down from a position. In the same way as you got the specials for Nelson Mandela, UB40. I think they did a song. What was it called? Was it 1 in 10 or something like that? About the number of people unemployed. So there was a lot of very politically charged songs, which were out with the perimeters of the sort of punk scene anyway. People shouldn't think of punk as some grand politicized movement in isolation to the rest of culture at the time.
Well, yeah, bands like Heaven 17 in their first album and stuff. That was just.
We don't need this fascist groove thing. I'll tell you something. When that record came out, I'm not entirely sure when that record came out, but I remember at the time of the Apostles. The Apostles were the only band who ever touched on the ideas of racism and fascism.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure that Heaven 17 song, not to mention the myriad other kind of dance records or stole records which would have addressed, the topic of racism.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, certainly the only kind of band within punk who ever did. I mean, Crass's attitude at the time was, exemplified by is it White Punks and Dope? Black man's got his problem and he can deal with that, so don't.
Or the Tubes and stuff. White Punks on Hope.
Kind of political.
I gotcha.
Yes, White Punks and Hope, which was actually a kind of statement like kind of, renouncing and distancing themselves from Rock Against Racism. The reasons for that, obviously there's, more evident reasons because of their involvement with the SWP, etc. But that's not how it came across the majority of people. A lot of people would have seen that as just basically, we're kind of shaking our hands of the issue of racism, which at that time was quite a kind of tangible threat on the streets of Britain, especially, England in particular, where after 1977, when the National Front were basically, they were posed to be like the third greatest political party in Britain in the 1979 elections. This didn't actually come to fruition because obviously Margaret Thatcher adopted a lot of their policies, and actually the Conservatives got in, getting that kind of extreme right vote. But it was a problem then, and it still is a problem. I mean, as I say, Britain's taken a seismic shift to the right, as I'm sure it's not the only country.
So let's talk a little bit about that, but let's keep it in context. So obviously,
let's keep it in context.
Let's keep it in context. So obviously, throughout the anarcho scene, I remember back in the mid-90s, I was living in a very small town outside of Bristol. I'd moved into kind of a squat kind of situation in St. Paul's in Bristol, like right in the centre. And there was the Reclaim the Streets movement. And I remember being part of a big day. One Saturday, Reclaim the Streets decided that they were going to close down the M32, which is the main motorway going into Bristol. I didn't have a message. I was 15. I was 16. I just moved out of home, so I didn't have a message. I was just jumping in for it just for the sheer tyranny of things.
Yes.
That's when I first started seeing people walking around with like the Socialist Workers Party, the SWP, flyers and stuff. And I realized that was kind of an ideology that always was there. Like, I didn't know any people directly in the Socialist Workers' Party.
Yes. Yeah.
But anytime there was any kind of counterculture against the mainstream, they were there. What's your opinion on the SWP?
I just think they're parasites. I just think basically, as you say, whenever you'd get anything, they just hop in the back of it.
Yeah.
To promote themselves. It's like you see every single demonstration. I mean, the classic example of this is, as people would say, they'd always turn up to these. I mean, I only ever attended a few kind of during the miners' strike, like events, kind of showing, solidarity, i.e., just basically kind of, and the print workers' strike as well. But you'd always get the Socialist Workers' Party there, and not only would they always have their kind of crappy placards with the Socialist Party logo, just as prominent as it says something like, reinstate sack miners or something like that. It's always promoting themselves. But the thing I always remember is there was a thing at Wapping when there was a big print workers dispute, which I think was about 1984 or 1985. And also there was another time when there was a guy called Patrick Harrington, who was kind of golden boy of the National Front at the time. Quite a kind of hardline fascist guy who went on to he was one of the architects of this ideology called the Third Position, which involved various Italian Forza Novo types like Roberto Fiore and all these other characters. But a nasty bunch. Yeah. And there was a lot of protests. There was a lot of protests against him in London at the time because he was trying to attend. Was in North London Polytechnic, and a lot of students were refusing to attend classes with him, and a lot of teachers were refusing to teach him. And I remember there, you'd get punch-ups between the anti-fascists and Nazis who were there protecting them. And you'd still get, like, the socialist workers there, like, trying to kind of almost, like, sell their papers to, like, guys who are...
I remember those papers kind of, like, very well.
Who are getting chased about by, like, kind of Nazis, or, print workers who are getting cops, like, battering them over the head with truncheons, or, as I was saying, the case, famous cases in Orgreave, when you've got cops, when you've got miners, like, fleeing cops who are charging after them with. There's actually a photograph of this on mounted cops chasing minors, and you've still got socialists like buy the paper. I mean, even now, I don't know if you've heard about. There's a massive big tower block in London called the Grenfell Tower. Have you been following this?
Oh, the one that caught fire?
Yes.
Yeah.
And basically hundreds of people will have died. The original sum they gave was like 70 people, but it's obviously hundreds of people. There's still
basically the people who weren't there out working or getting their groceries died.
Yes, and I mean hundreds of people. And there's been demonstrations against the companies who are responsible for the cladding, the sort of covering of the building, which they'd obviously cut corners, and that turned out to be a sort of combustible material. And there've been demonstrations against them, as well as demonstrations against the company who actually was responsible for installing the cladding. And socialist workers have been attending them with, justice for Grenfell, socialist worker, that's really disgusting.
Well, there was a bit of a further backstory to like the SWP being involved with that, because it came down to the rehousing of the survivors and the the fact that they were kind of starting a kind of class war narrative over empty housing.
Yes, I mean, even
rehousing people and basically reappropriating empty properties, which it sounds like a good idea, but it's reappropriation is a very tidy word for forcing someone against their will to do something, which is kind of like what the Socialist Workers' Party would do. Whereas there's been a lot of people saying, like, in that situation, the people responsible should be forced to pay for the rehoming of these people, as opposed to just going up to people who weren't involved and reappropriating their property. So,
no, very true. Totally. But the fact of the matter is, I believe all the people who lost their houses in Grenfell were offered some absolutely paltry sum, like sort of 8,000. So I don't actually even want to like quote the sum because I'll probably get it wrong.
Yeah, of course.
They were offered some paltry sum, which, I mean, the average rent now in London is like £1,300 a month for a room. So if you're like a family in a house, you're talking about probably at least like £2,000 just to £2,000 just to like hire a place, which is $3,000 a month. Unimaginable. Actually, to his credit, I will say that Jeremy Corbyn, who's now the head of the Labour Party, he actually just kind of said that, basically, if people want to take houses back, because I mean, half of London now, there's areas like Aldgate in which a sort of massive percentage of the residential property is actually empty. So it's just been land backed by overseas property developers, and they're just like basically properties in a property portfolio, which are just accruing wealth, but there's nobody in there. And to his credit, Jeremy Corbyn said people should basically just squat these properties. But but very right. I mean, it shouldn't be up to people who have been tenants, whether council tenants or private tenants, and have got families, have got commitments, have got jobs, and so on. People shouldn't be reduced to squatting. It's disgusting. Last time I lived, it's even entertaining concept.
When I was still living in England, and I was going to various parts of London, you didn't need governmental permission to squat things.
Yeah.
I remember not long before I left Poland to just join the EU, the squat scene was blooming. So,
yes.
Yeah. Like Hackney, I remember Hackney's probably a different world now.
Yeah.
But
and another thing lots of folk don't acknowledge again is the fact that the squatting scene, the punk squatting scene is just a tiny fraction of the squatting scene. It's like my mate Martin, one of the guys who formed Class War and sort of AFA and stuff like that. Like, he's quite an old guy. He's now about 65 or something. But he was saying, like, in the kind of late 60s, early 70s, there was loads of Irish folk. He's London Irish.
Yeah.
He's saying lots of Irish folk could come over and basically just squat places and just work in building sites and then, just go home for a while. And that was like a big thing. And in the same way now, as you say, there's lots of Polish, Eastern European, Hungarian. There's a massive population of them, Russians, etc., living in squads, and there was even more so before a lot of these countries were actually allowed into the EU. People would come via Dublin, come to London. Because the other thing is, London, people say the population of London is like 12 million. Population of London obviously isn't 12 million. London, basically, that's a population of people who fill out a census. I've never filled out a census in my life. Right. I don't know who has. That's just like a thing you get through your door. It's like, I haven't even seen one for like 20 years. I remember seeing them in Edinburgh. I haven't even seen a census for 20 years. That is what the population of London is based on.
Well, they say the population of Los Angeles is 12 million people, and that's obviously, with it being next door to Mexico, that's obviously not even vaguely true.
London's the same. It's like, that's what they say about London. When I first moved down to London in December 1999, I had a friend who was actually working for the census, because it's one of the things you can get a temping job in. And he's saying the population is obviously over 15 million.
Yes.
But that's because London, there's hundreds of people. And again, all these people who are going to come in from other countries and are prepared to work for wages less than minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially like an invisible infrastructure in the economy of London. If it wasn't for these people, London would collapse tomorrow. They're the people who clean the tubes. They're the people who clean the streets. They're the people who clean the hotels.
Mm-hmm.
They're the people who do all these kind of crap jobs that basically British people are too lazy or kind of up themselves to countenance doing. I remember going to this, just the name drop here. I remember going to this daughter's birthday party or something in this really posh hotel. And I was speaking to these
you broke up the whole section, but it might be a good thing. So.
Hold on, it says internet connection problem. There's a connection with the internet between you two.
Yeah, it's
is it
fine.
all good?
It's fine. We'll fight through it.
If it cuts, you can always edit it.
Yeah.
I remember, and there was these girls coming around who were like Hungarian or something, coming around with the free booze. And I was speaking to this girl, and she was saying, at the time, she was getting paid something like £2.40, which then was about half the minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
And her and about 4 friends slept in this room downstairs in this hotel, which was where they kept drinks. So essentially, she's staying in a kind of, what rooms in the bottom of bars are like.
Yeah.
They've got a bunk bed, and she shares the mattress with this other girl, and that comes off her wages, and they get paid £2.40 an hour. And that's just I was in, I can't remember which hotel it was. It was the Ritz or the Grosvenor or one of these super, super, super posh hotels. And these are hotels, and I was speaking to her, I was going, so how many other people can I do that? And she was like, about 200. But these hotels are massive, and that's an enormous infrastructure. So if it wasn't for these people, that's top echelon of, it works all the way down. It's like a pyramid, as all these things are.
No, it's very much that way here. I don't think I could have moved to Los Angeles if it wasn't for the Mexican community. That's the community that has actually brought any kind of culture here. Because take them out of this, and it's a very ugly place.
Yeah, Kid Rock.
yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's get back to music. So I first saw you, and you didn't know it, in the early 2000s, Fleece and Firkin. The gentleman that I mentioned earlier on, Dave Simpson, who works for Killing Joke, he dragged me out to the Parkinsons show at the Fleece and Firkin in Bristol.
Yes.
And it was fantastic. It was...
Yeah, there were some pretty crazy shows.
It was a breath of fresh air. It was probably right place, wrong time.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. No, I think probably right time, because I think then, the music then was, you remember there was this kind of music genre called Quiet is the New Loud?
Oh, God.
And it was all these super kind of fey kind of bands who perhaps been influenced by Radiohead or Muse, but decided to do it acoustically.
Right. Mm-hmm.
It was a terrible, terrible scene for music, and also all the crap like the kind of Libertines and Razorlight and stuff like that.
Right.
Well, actually, they came a wee bit after us, because they basically were kind of always used to come to our gigs and that.
Yeah.
But Parkinsons really kind of gave the music scene a big kick up the arse back then.
Yeah. How did you end up with a bunch of Portuguese guys? Is the question.
Weird story. I kind of, through a total chance meeting with this woman in a bar. I ended up working for the managing company of the band Suede.
Oh yeah,
I think London Suede. They're called London Suede in America.
oh, I back in the 90s, I was a sway. When I was a kid, I liked me a bit of Brett Anderson.
Yeah, no, massive band, good live band as well. So I ended up working for their management company Interceptor for a year, and during that time, I went to this night of punk films with his girl. It was at the cinema, and it was footage from CBGB's. Loads of stuff which is now up on YouTube, Dead Boys,
Right.
Debbie Harry, Talking Heads, etc. And halfway through the gig, Dead Boys playing Sonic Reducer came on. And this mad bastard just suddenly stood up in the middle of the cinema, and he was like singing along and just going crazy. And everybody was like, sit down, shut up. You know, nobody's here to watch you. And he was just kind of giving it that. And I was thinking, yeah, this guy's a dick. But then I went outside for a smoke. And this guy came out, and he was smoking as well. And then all these people just attacked him. You know, there were about 4 or 5 people just jumped him, and they were all like beating him. And I was like,
oh shit,
the guy might be a dick, but there's no need for that.
Yeah,
so I managed to like pull a few folk off him, and and bundled him inside, and said, let's, you stay in there. And I kind of and I was just like, told these other people, just, stay back.
Yeah.
What are you playing at? It's just one guy. And then didn't think really anything more of it. And then a couple of weeks later, I went to this club we always used to go Trash in London, in Soho.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy came up to me and he was like, oh, man, you saved my life. And I was like, oh, right, you're that guy. And, think nothing of it. And we got sort of chatting away. It turned out that he used to be he knew the Apostles. He was a big fan of Polloi.
Oh, shit.
And he said that, I'm in this band and we've got a gig booked in 2 weeks' time. And our drummer's just left. You play the drums, but you fancy having a couple of rehearsals and drumming for us? So I was like, I wasn't doing anything at the time. I was like, aye, sure.
Right.
So I had a couple of rehearsals with them and played the first. Oh, sorry, I'm going to yawn. Played the first. No reflection on you, by the way. Played the first gig with them like 2 weeks later, and then everything kind of went really mad. Very, very quickly built this crazy following. That was when I was drumming for. Working for Suede. Right. Suede's management company. Mm-hmm. So I got David, who ended up being the bass player in Part 1, who was one of Suede's main managers, to come along and see us. He loved the band, signed us to the management company, and then I think the 6th gig we played was like Reading Festival, and then Glastonbury, and then Tour of America, Tour of Japan, Fuji Festival.
Reading
Everything was
Festival,
just crazy. So it was kind of like being a member after playing with Political Asylum, Polloi, the Apostles. All these bands where basically, you're lucky if you're kind of going to the gig in a van or on a bus, and then, crashing on somebody's floor.
Didn't you guys get kicked out of Reading Festival?
And then basically playing all these big festivals and get treated like royalty and getting put up in big posh hotels, and it was fantastic.
Well, was there a thing where you guys got kicked out of Reading Festival or something? Something about a chocolate cake and the Strokes.
Yeah. That was basically, we were meant to have done this tour with the Strokes. The Strokes wanted us to play this tour supporting them. And their manager, who was this really kind of creepy, like Woody Allen guy, we had like a meeting with them at this table backstage in the kind of VIP area. And he was just a dick. So I was thinking, what's this? And Alfonso ended up like kind of covering himself with like this chocolate. They got like slices of chocolate gato. And Alfonso was just kind of like rubbed it all over his face. Why he didn't smear it in the guy's face, I don't know. I think they just thought we were degenerates after that. So they were certainly right in that respect.
Well, the music reflects that. Right. Give me 1 second. I'm going to be very rude of your interviewer to run out the room. I ain't editing shit out. That was a total lie. So the Parkinsons were. I mean, that was between 2000 and 2005, that was an injection of
I left them in
punk rock
I left them in 2002.
Hello? You got me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that was like an injection of 77 kind of buzzcocks punk rock that just didn't exist at the time.
Totally.
Did you, I mean, you to that point, you've been DJing, you got into the kind of in the 90s in the rave scene a little bit, right? So.
Yeah, that's what I did. I mean, basically, towards the mid-90s, there wasn't really much of a sort of punk scene happening, especially in Scotland. And
you worked your way back up to Scotland then, right?
No, no, I was in Scotland. I was basically until I was living in Scotland all that time.
Oh, okay, right.
Um, and there wasn't really, so I just got in. I got into kind of electronic. I'd always been into electronic music, kind of Throbbing Gristle, Cabaret
Mm-hmm.
Voltaire, um, sort of Michio Bianchi, all that kind of thing. And I just got into that more, and then kind of electro, and then sort of house and techno when that came along. So I spent basically 10 years between nine, sort of January 1989 was when I started my first club. So
Right.
between January '89 and December 99 or 98, 99, I just basically started doing. I was running clubs in Edinburgh,
Right,
and very big
that's a
clubs.
chunk of time, that is.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
basically 10 years,
yeah.
pretty much to the month for 10 years. I was just running clubs, and yeah, I mean basically the biggest club in Edinburgh for years, Soma,
Right.
biggest Saturday night club, which was pretty mad. Which was
Did you envision getting behind the drum kit at any point in time during then, or was that just that Parkinson's kind
I
of
think I
thing?
kind of did because I'd always kept my drum kit and I'd always enjoyed drumming. I think it's one of these things that once you do it, it's kind of part of you
Right.
and you always enjoy doing it. But so I always, yeah, I probably always thought I'd get back into doing that. I mean, even during that time, I recorded an album with Polloi and did like the first Polloi European tour because I
Oh,
ended up
yeah.
sharing. I mean,
Hmm.
I'd known Deke, the singer of Polloi, since we were. I mean, my parents knew Deke. They were friends with Deke's parents, and I think I first met Deke when I was 4 years old. Although obviously I don't remember
Hmm.
that. But I've known him kind of like all my life, and we ended up sharing a flat in Edinburgh for a few years.
Right.
During which time I was doing clubs, but also during that time I ended up recording the first Oi Polloi album, Unite and Win, and doing the first European tour with them, and that Punkade single. So I
Were
think
you responsible for kind of putting that kind of oi kind of vibe in oi polloi then, or was that
no,
something they just wanted to do?
I think that was always like Deke's kind of baby. I think that was always like Deke's thing. Deke's enduring love for the Cockney Rejects.
Yeah, I was gonna say the
I think
Cockney
was what came
Rejects
from
definitely
that.
shines
But
through.
I mean, to be honest, I probably always thought I'd get back into drumming. What I didn't always think was I'd get back into DJing. That was
Right.
something which just came. I think to a great degree. I think basically Oliver Shepherd is one of the people who kind of really gave me the idea to start doing that again. I mean, I've always kind of done DJing, but since I moved to London, there isn't really so much of a club kind of DJ scene in London
Hmm.
as there was in Scotland. Or if there is, it's very, very different and fairly kind of dull and boring.
Right.
But
It depends what kind of stuff you're
I
DJing, I
mean, I've certainly
guess.
like when I did that gig with you in Austin.
Right.
I've certainly enjoyed playing these old, generally kind of like post punk stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff that has maybe got a bit of a kind of dancey vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fantastic playing those records. I've enjoyed that a lot more than I've generally, than I ever enjoyed, you know, many DJ spots in 10 years of DJing house and techno clubs.
It's the strange
I mean,
thing.
the first time I played Lethal Amounts, I mean that was absolutely fantastic.
I was there.
The last time I played, one of the needles broke after I'd been DJing for about 10 minutes, so there was nothing else I could do.
I think that was the
Danny
night
just
I ended up giving you a ride home, right? I can't remember.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right, that's right. That was a bit of a nightmare night.
Uh,
But the first time was fantastic. First time was an absolute blast, and fantastic people. And that
well,
first time I came to LA, when I think was the first time I met you, when I DJ'd at Release the Bat,
hmm
New Church, Ralphie's Club Xerox.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Holy shit.
Well, yeah, you did Xerox. What else did I play at? That club Night Creatures.
Right.
In where's that? That's out south. What's it called?
Oh, I don't leave Los
Orange
Angeles.
County.
I don't leave Los Angeles. That's
Huntington.
scary.
I went to that with Leah. Leah drove us to that because that's a crazy thing. The idea of the distances that people in LA cover
Hmm.
was then when I came over that first time. I spent most of my time knocking about with that girl Leah Alvarez, amazing girl, and she kind of drove me everywhere. I had a fantastic time with her, and I was DJing somewhere, maybe Ralphie's Club or maybe Lethal Amounts,
Hmm.
and the promoter Ishi, who does Night Creatures, came up. Oh no, it was somebody else I think. Said, "Oh, we're doing a club tomorrow night. Do you want to come and play at it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." I was kind of drunk and whatever. I said, "Yeah, sure." And I said to Leah, "Oh, how how far away is that? She's like, oh, it's about 4 hours away. It's like, ah, fair enough. I goes, no, we'll drive there. So we actually drove to this. I mean, that's basically the same distance as from like London to Edinburgh.
Yeah,
So how do you go driving there?
That's
It's like unthinkable. We did that, and that was another absolutely amazing night. Absolute blast. Fantastic people.
I think there was another night at the complex in Glendale where I was hanging out having a beer with you.
Yes. Yeah. What was that again?
That was the guys from Release the Bats put a night on.
Yeah. Or it was maybe it was called New Church, or maybe it was some other name. I can't remember.
That was it, New Church.
That was a great night. All those nights, all those events I played in LA, that was just like one of the best trips of my life. Fantastic time. Just
crossing paths all over the place. It was fun. I remember the night at Xerox in Highland Park. You had some friends from Pasadena. Hanging out. And they were super cool people, and they were just about to have a kid as well. So I was
No, Matthew. I saw Matthew Matthew came along to the Part 1 gig last Friday.
Oh, he did.
I hadn't seen him. I haven't seen him since then.
Right.
But he's an amazing guy.
Yeah,
Absolutely amazing guy. I'm going to be doing. He's like an incredible producer. I mean, the music he's done is just mind blowing.
Well, and I'm hopefully going to be doing. I was going to say I wanted to be his friend anyway.
Recording a track, like a very tasty little remix of a song, which will give a lot of people a lot of surprises. So hopefully, I'm going to be doing that sometime very soon.
Yeah, it's the strangest thing. But what brought you back into that? Obviously, you mentioned Oliver. Oliver is someone.
I did this because I used to write for Vice, and I did this mix for Vice. Had started their it's called Noisy. It's like a TV and kind of music channel they do.
Right.
And Andy Capper, who used to be the editor of Vice, I think he's now the global. No, he's not the global. Maybe he's a global editor. He's certainly the editor of Vice TV. He was saying, "Oh, you should do like a mix of all these, all kind of like anarcho-punk stuff," because he used to be into that as well. So I did this mix, and it went up a Noisy along with this kind of interview feature. And off the back of that, I got offered a few gigs. And then I did a mix for Oliver's thing before I went over.
Mm-hmm.
Just when Part 1 sort of got going.
Yeah. How was it? Obviously, you started to see through Oliver, but through Part 1 as well. You start to see that convergence.
Oliver was one of that. I mean, he was basically like, before I even got in touch with him myself, unknown to me, he'd been like championing Part 1 for years.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually started, even before I was on Facebook, he'd started up like a Part 1 kind of tribute page on Facebook, which was like the only Facebook page for the band until I started the one up in 2013.
Yeah, I've known Oliver since probably about 2002, 2003.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, if it wasn't for his support and promotion of Part 1, it's kind of doubtable whether we'd ever really have got to, whether things would actually have happened to the way they did.
It's strange because I've known a couple of people throughout the world who, even though they come from very peculiar parts of the world, like Oliver's in Dallas, Texas, with the internet and just the enthusiasm, things come together. When I first got to know him, I just joined Chaos UK on bass, and we started playing stuff, and he hit me up, and he was asking us if we needed any help with the website, because
fantastic.
The Chaos UK guys didn't know anything about fucking making websites. You know what I mean? It's like fucking they drank cider and got in fights, which is and generally act like psychopaths, which is
they made homebrew, not websites.
Yeah, exactly. And although that never came together because we did just drink too much cider and not actually get anything done, he'd stayed a friend, and he was very much into that D-beat scene. He was into
he's got fairly eclectic and a lot of eclectic taste in music, and seems to know a lot about a lot of different genres.
Well, I was very surprised that he got into that kind of more gothy side of things, but then I started to realise that he was a big Rudimentary Peni fan, Part 1 fan, and it kind of the crossover happened, and that's where we are now. There's a lot of bands who drew more influence from that anarcho thing, probably a more
Yes. Well, I mean, he did that. He did
existential
that
side of the
amazing piece
anarcho thing.
recently for Cult Nation on the kind of like these kind of genre of these dark punk. Is that what they're called? Dark punk bands. It was a piece that it had Slimy Member, Cemetery,
Right.
all these like amazing bands who played San Antonio. Yeah. When we were there 2 years ago, and I remember being blown away. Cemetery. They closed their set with a cover of Chameleons, the Bellow and what's it called? That song.
Yeah. I'm the only person on earth who doesn't like the
Bellow in the Sand or something. I can't remember. But it was I've got the album, and it was one of these things. I was like, God, I know that song, and they played it, and it was really amazing. It's kind of like, I'm sure I know that song, but I actually prefer because they sent me a copy of the album. I actually prefer their version to Chameleon's version. Their version is just like absolutely amazing, and it's one of these. It's one of these kind of few moments where you actually just wish you could go back in time just to actually see that performance. I just wish I could have seen that performance thinking, yes, that's the song. And then I'd have appreciated it more instead of just thinking, God, that's a brilliant song, but I'm sure I know that from somewhere, you know? I mean, I probably hadn't listened to that Chameleons record for over 20 years.
Right.
You know, because I used to be, round about in the kind of mid to late 80s, I was quite into them. And I probably haven't listened to that record since then. And then just seeing it again, it was like, whoa. I remember Slimy Member were amazing as well, and I got a tape of them which I was below. Fantastic band. And who else? Everybody who played that festival was incredible. Everybody I saw then was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it's the strangest thing. The year after because the guy who puts the festival on is the drummer of my band.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
that makes sense. Makes sense. Okay.
The guy called Robert Sullen. Yeah. So he's been playing in my band Chrysler's War for years now, and so we're playing over there this time. And he's slowly expanding the festival out. He had a bunch of good bands, a really good band from Spain. Well, Barcelona, Belgrado played last.
Oh, Belgrado, amazing! Part One played a few gigs with them.
Yeah.
And there's also a band who I met. They played with Doom when I went to see them at this free gig a couple of weeks ago. Who are from London, and they said they played the festival. They might have been in some other band called Horror Vacui or something, Italian band.
Yeah, I know them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I can't remember their other band who I think it was played the festival. They're amazing as well.
Yeah, it's the strange thing. It's I don't know. A lot of these bands still sound like goth bands, but they sound like goth bands recorded in a garage on a 4-track.
Yeah,
which is just a
garage goth. Garage goth.
Garage goth. There you go, GG. We got it. We nailed it. So back to part one. How did you end up with these guys? What was they were?
I ended up in part one basically in the early 80s, like about 82, 83, when they did their first tape. I just wrote off to them. I wrote off to Mark for a copy of their In the Shadow of the Cross tape. And I got that back, and we wrote a few times. But, literally...
It's getting late on your end.
I'm tired. I've been up since about 6 this morning. So, basically, since 1983, we wouldn't have been in touch at all. Then, later on, there was like this crass... it was like a crass event. I can't remember what it was called. It was a thing at the NFT, I think. And Penny Rambo was there, giving his usual kind of spiel, and I said something, and then Mark actually pipped up with something as well, and it's like you're in this thing. I kind of looked round. I was like, it's a pretty distinctive looking guy. I was like, sure, I know that weird looking guy from somewhere. Sure, I know him from somewhere. And then when I was getting the tube later, I met him and this other guy, and I was just like, listen, I saw you earlier, mate. I'm sure I know you from somewhere. And he was like, oh, yeah, I used to play in a band called Part One. I said, of course, I used to write to you. And then I said I was in the Apostles. And, so we kind of paths had crossed, 25 or so years ago.
Right.
And then very, very briefly talked. Then, by luck, we actually met at this other gig about, 10 years later, 10, 15 years later. There was this other gig in Shoreditch, which ended up in a bit of a kind of fracas. And I ended up with a big chunk of glass stuck in my leg. And my trouser all covered with blood. And then kind of having, as you can imagine, expressing my dissatisfaction to the person who'd been on stage and had thrown a beer bottle, which had caused that. And so I ended up speaking to Mark outside that night, and he was saying, I'm sure he was saying, "Oh, we're thinking of getting the band back together." And I was like, "Well, if you ever do, I'd love to drum for you. Please give me a shout." And I think it was probably through Oliver Shepherd that Mark probably contacted me in 2013 to say he wants to get the band together.
Right. Crikey. I mean, they had a drummer originally, obviously.
Yes, they had a drummer who ended up drumming for that band, the Cardiacs.
Oh, okay. Right, okay. And
he joined the Cardiacs. And I'm not sure at all. I've never met him. When we first started, we had the original bassist as well, Chris Pascoe, who's a great guy, but just wasn't really into it, which is kind of understandable.
Right.
But I've never met the original drummer. But I don't know if he's even still drumming. I don't really think anybody's got any great contact with him. I couldn't speak for Mark or Jake, but I don't think so.
So how does it feel drumming in possibly the most miserable band that ever existed?
I'm sure if I was to be in Radiohead or somebody like that, I'd find that.
I don't know. I don't know. There's a certain
it's been good. It's been good. We played some amazing, absolutely blinding gigs.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the ones in Europe, Paris, Poland, all absolutely fantastic. Very unfortunately, a number of factors conspired against us, so that when we did the brief American tour, that wasn't really that good.
Yeah. I wish we could have got you guys over on the West Coast. That would have been.
I wish we could have done. Well, basically, the guy who's promoting it really kind of made the balls up of like a number of things.
Right.
Fairly elementary things such as booking the venue we're meant to play at, having equipment booked for the venue we're meant to play at the other night.
Not exactly minutia, no.
Yeah.
That would be a problem.
So that was all kind of pretty hard work. You know what I mean? You've travelled like 4,000 miles. You turn up to a place, and it's kind of like, oh, sorry guys, it's been a double booking tonight. It must have been a double booking. We did not get any recollection of you playing.
I actually had this conversation with Mark from the Mob. When he was over.
Same guy.
Oh, same promoter? Okay, all right. I don't know who the promoter is.
No, I don't know. I can't even remember the guy's name, but I know that the Mob had an absolute nightmare too.
Right. I remember talking to the Mob. I was going to go see the Mob in LA. They were playing this small squat, and I couldn't go because I had 2 broken ribs, and I knew it was going to be a disaster. So I drove.
Broken ribs are a nightmare. I broke 2 ribs.
Yeah. So I didn't want to be.
2 ribs. I was coming out. I was walking up Archway Tube Station, and I was on my way to this girl's birthday party, and I had like a bottle of champagne, and those bales that you get newspapers wrapped in.
Mm-hmm.
That thing. I stepped into one of them. I went flying, but I was so concerned with not breaking the bottle of champagne. I landed. I managed to kind of land with like my elbow under my ribs like that,
right.
And the bottle of champagne I managed to put perfectly on the pavement. Didn't crack at all, but I cracked 2 ribs, and it was just directly beside this bus stop at the top of Archway Tube Station, and all these people said that was almost balletic. It was just such an absolutely bizarre sight.
Right.
But we heard the crack. Are you okay? I was like, I still went to the party, but the next day I had to go to hospital, and I got 2 ribs, and then I broke them again a few months later, so they never really cracked. My chest's kind of like E.T., where the creature comes out of his stomach. Mm-hmm. It's all like mashed up there. It's not good.
Yeah, it's not a pleasant thing. I know. I mean, obviously the Subhumans come over here twice a year and clean house, but Subhumans have always brought a good crowd. Even in the 90s, when things were a bit weird, the Subhumans were still pulling a good crowd. So.
Yes, always solid. Yeah, and Chaos UK, they're always like playing about all the place, aren't they? They seem to be a band. Them and the Rukas and Disorder seem to be in like Tokyo every second week.
Yeah, we did all right. I went to Japan for a month with them. We did a tour in the UK with Discharge, but with Rat from the Verucas singing.
Right, yes. They're basically just like, it's a fairly secular country, Tokyo, but it's like, if they've got any religion, or Japan rather, but if they've got any religion, it's pretty much Discharge,
Oh my God. The stories I had about punk rock, my month in Japan with Gabba from KSUK was the most legendary month of my life. It was an interesting thing. I don't want to go into any details because not all of it was that legal. And I'm sure a lot of the people involved probably don't want to be mentioned by name. But we toured with Forward. We have a mutual friend, Suichi.
Yeah. Oh, crazy.
Yeah.
He's now reformed Deathside. I saw Deathside about 3 or 4 months ago. They played London.
Deathside. Yeah. No, Suichi was the guitar player. The I can't remember the name, but the singer was Deathside, right?
Ishia Forward. Yeah.
And a band Warhead.
I know Warhead. Yes.
Yeah, that's
fucking... Yeah. I mean, I've got photos of them in the book. I have to send you that.
Yeah, they're fucking nut jobs. They are fucking insane people. But it was the last show we played over there was a sold-out show in Tokyo with Tetsuari. And, And Sakivi from Gizm turned up. And I met Sakivi, and he was the single most scary human being I've ever met in my life. But I think I'd been built up to that fact.
Yeah.
But no, it's fun. I still have a Gizm shirt that was given by Sakivi, and a lot of people are like, you can't wear Gizm shirts if Sakivi doesn't approve of it. It's like, well, I got this directly from him.
Yeah. Well, they reformed. They played a few gigs in Europe last year. I don't know what they were like. I mean, I was really surprised that what's his name? The drummer wasn't playing for them.
Right.
The original drummer. What's he called? Iron Fist Tetsuro? Or...
Didn't he die? Didn't the drummer... No, the guitar player died, I think.
Yes.
Yeah,
the guitar player died.
Yeah.
But they're... Hold on, I'll tell you his name. Iron Fist Tatsushima. See, in my book, there's 4 of us there.
Let's see the cover.
He seems to play in about like a dozen bands. I remember going to this gig, and you go to there's all these gigs, and you see the lineups, and you're kind of like, oh, this must be like a festival, basically going on over like a weekend. Right. And it's actually all the bands playing that night. The gig started at like 4 in the afternoon and goes on till 12 at night. And I remember going to this gig, and it was Die You Bastard, Fight Back, and about 3 or 4 other bands that he was drumming for. And the guy's just such an amazing drummer. One of the most powerful drummers, probably the most powerful drummer I've ever seen in my entire life. The guy's just incredible.
Right.
And he was drumming for all these bands. Maybe he'd have like a set off, and then he'd play with this other band, and I was like, man, how can you do that? But the guy is like the size of an ox.
You don't feel like doing that yourself?
It's kind of like, I'd probably have actually just gone along just to see him drumming, irrespective of, liking Gizm. But he wasn't playing, so I just thought, maybe not. I know some folk who went along.
Right.
But again, it's like, I don't know if they've played many gigs. I know they played like a sort of fairly private show in like a rehearsal room. Right. I think it was. Oh no, was that Gauze? I think that was maybe Gauze. Mm-hmm. But I don't know if they'll play many other gigs. But hopefully.
No, it was an interesting month. We got to meet a lot of people. I got to see a certain old school side to the Japanese punk rock thing. It was explained to me the traditional the prism of punk. Was it punk, samurai, and Yakuza? I got to see kind of.
And you were at the apex by the sounds of it.
Oh fuck, man! The first show we played was in Nagasaki, and there was a band called, I think they were called AI from near Nagasaki, the bigger city just north of Nagasaki, and the guitar player got rather drunk, and in the after show party decided to drive to the 7-Eleven and actually drove the tour bus through the 7-Eleven and smashed up the entire store, and so we had. For various other reasons.
But then after negotiations, the manager of the 7-Eleven was apologising to you for his 7-Eleven being in the way of your tour bus. Well, I know how it goes.
Well, the next show we played, he basically got a very heavy dressing down from the members of Warhead and Forward, and we were forced to watch, and it was one of the biggest eye-opening things ever. I don't want to go into too much detail because, like I said, there wasn't an awful lot of legality involved. But
we can swap some stories about that stuff sometime when I next see you. We We can swap some stories about such things.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
When we next have a drink.
And on that note,
I've got to get over to LA. All this talk of Japan and everything, I've got to get over back to LA sometime soon.
You're always welcome, mate. You are always welcome.
But I was meant to have had the photography exhibition at Lethal Amount sometime. So hopefully, Danny boy, if you're out there listening, get a photography
I'm going to get Danny on.
Get a photography exhibition on there. Come over, because he was talking about doing it one night, but the one night he suggested I couldn't do because I had something. It was too short notice. I couldn't come over. But that's what he was saying, just like a one night, bish bash bosh pop-up exhibition, and then some sort of club night after that. And I want to go to a sex sales night. A sex sale night sounds mental.
It looks pretty mental, yeah. Did you hear about...
So I have to go there. So I want to go over sometime, do the exhibition, and then go to sex sales. Hope you're listening there, Danny.
Danny just had a photo exhibition called Nick Cave Smoking.
I saw that. That's Andy. Andy Harriman. She's amazing. Right. She came to London. Ended up hanging out with her in London when she was over. Amazing girl. Fantastic stuff. Strangely enough, a guy I know from my clubbing days in Edinburgh, Innes Riki, he had photos in that exhibition himself.
It's nuts. And it's funny because Nick Cave was playing like a series of shows in Los Angeles.
Yes, I saw the photo she posted, and he asked for it to be on like another night or something.
Yeah, so they actually had to go to the Nick Cave show, and Nick Cave made them put it was supposed to be a tongue-in-cheek one-off thing, and suddenly Nick Cave's having them put this photo exhibition on at the show. And Danny is exactly the same age as me, almost to the day. I've known him since I moved over here, and he's carved out something that is truly.
He's done amazingly well for himself. Amazingly well for himself.
Yeah, I'm very.
It's really good to see. But it just shows, if you've got the sort of dynamism, you can do that.
I'm gonna get him on here. This podcast thing is gonna keep going and going. And Danny is one of the next ones. We're going to talk about subversive art culture. Yeah, and the gay scene and stuff. We're going to go.
Quality guy. I'm sure he'll have many fascinating tales to tell.
Absolutely. So, on that note, we're an hour and a half in exactly, and Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing this time with us.
Okay. Absolute pleasure. My glass is empty.
Yeah, mine too. At this point.
But I'm sure the conversation could go on all night.
Yeah. Well,
it's been an absolute pleasure. Shaky hand and big love. Hold on, as they do in Japan, right? Big love to everybody. Is that right? Okay.
They do that. I don't know. They were just drinking and fighting when I was.
Okay. Big love to everybody in LA.
There you go.
Let's do the gag thing. LA. Can't do that. Okay. But fantastic. Big love to everybody and all the best. And hope to see you sometime very, very soon.
Cheers, mate. Cheers, Chris. Let's do this again sometime.
Bye.
Thanks, bud.